Please also join us for our 5 mindfulness trainings recitation, this and every first Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Sister Clear Grace and Sister Suchness perform the recitation ceremony to be in accord with the practice of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Please also join us for our 5. This is free, but you need to register on the Heartwood website under retreats to get the link to the Zoom meeting. Also coming right up on March 8th at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific is the 20th Outstanding Women in Buddhism Awards Ceremony. And Heartwood is honored to host that event here through Zoom. This will be it will be the first virtual celebration in honor of the United Nations International Women's Day. And outstanding women in Buddhism from USA, Taiwan, Thailand, and more will be recognized and represented there. With that as well, you'll need to register on the Heartwood website under the retreats page for the link. We also just wanted to thank you so much for donations of food through the Amazon wish list that we've received, donations of time and financial support that's been offered from the community. If you wish to offer additional support, you can learn about that by going to the Heartwood webpage. Those funds that are donated go to our Nuns Fund, Mortgage Relief Fund, social projects. So thank you once again. And lastly, just please like, follow, and share Heartwood on social media accounts, and that way you can help us spread the Dharma. Thank you so much, and here's Venerable.
Venerable, we're waiting for some of our friends to arrive into the room. They're having some complications, so maybe they'll be here in about 3 to 5 minutes. Yeah, working out the password problem.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hear we have a password problem, and they've asked me to give about 2 minutes for friends who are trying to log on. I'm wondering if there's a way that we can open this up so that, is there that anybody who wants to come into these rooms can come in without having to register? Is that a possibility? I don't think that we, some things we, what's the word, restrict. We restrict access to perhaps people we know who are able to better tolerate the conversation. You don't give a baby strong meat, you might choke them. And for vegetarians, I mean just heavy food, okay? So you might, they might choke. So you make sure that the food that you're serving is appropriate for the spiritual development of the hearer. Otherwise, what are we doing? And at the same time, when it's open, so many people at different levels of practice join at one time, and so the skill comes in how to serve a meal that there's something everybody can eat from and have a takeaway. So it takes this kind of balancing when you open up teachings to a large group. And so we try to confine it to those who really want to be on. And the way I know is that you have to go out and register to get on. It inspires a confidence in me that there is a concerted effort. And we're going to talk about that a little bit when we go into our Dharma Contemplation for today. And I know that for the past couple of months, we haven't been doing as much of a contemplation, piggybacking off of this is Thursday, right?
Yes.
Okay, piggybacking off of the Tuesday class where we're doing 50 weeks of transformation, we're specifically not doing so much of a Dharma study, but we are doing a Dharmic inquiry. In other words, how are you living it in the moment? In the sutta, I think it's sutta number 6 or sutta number 8, in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha especially considers practice something other than meditating. So when we think we are good meditators, we know it off the pillow, not so much on the pillow, but we know how well we are how well our meditation is going by how we live and move and have our experience in life off of the pillow. So of course in the West we pride ourselves on being truly intellectual beings, and we invest a lot of time in breaking down and understanding things. And I don't think that we are alone. You know, I look at the suttas, the discourses of the Buddha, and they're such simple teachings. Sometimes they're too simple for us to understand because we like things complicated. But it gives us, we can invest more into the discussion around it because we like to talk about things. It's a lot easier to talk about things and to intellectually get it than to actually live some things. I remember one time I was in an airport and I was bored. We were grounded. You know, there was 20 feet of snow or something, and I was stranded in Chicago, the airport, and I was just walking around the airport. You know, I took a stroll, and I had an experience in that airport. You know, where there was an internal voice that invited me to look around, and what did I see? And I saw an airport full of women with children and babies crying and everything. And so I answered, I felt something at the same time. I felt a great pity for them, you know, and I said, where are their husbands? Just an airport full of women and babies. And I used to fly at a class and at a time that, you know, I didn't encounter a lot of women and children, mostly like business people flying here and there. So I was suddenly shocked at this, and this is what was maybe bothering me so much, is because the airport was so noisy and there were whining babies and there were all of that. And I said, but suddenly, instead of being irritated, I was touched, you know, by the fact that there were all these women with kids who were frustrated in the airport. And then that, and I felt sorry for them, and I said, where are their husbands? And the voice said they don't have one. And then it said, could you die for a friend? And I had to put together the previous conversation and that question, could you die for a friend? And I was thinking, yeah, I think so. You know, maybe not a stranger, but a friend in danger would, you know, evoke some response from me. Maybe not a, quote, rational response, but perhaps a heart response. And so, yes, I think I could die for a friend. And then that voice said, dying is easy. Can you live for a friend? Now, living can be like 70 years of, as I commonly say, overlooking a slight and tolerating a fault. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I could live for one. You know, but I knew that I was being invited to something, a higher way of living, a higher way of being, invited to a love walk. Are we ready to start? Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, we're gonna start in a minute. A higher love walk, and I said, yes, I think I could. You know, and I knew that the heart was willing, but the flesh was weak, and that I was going to need something to strengthen the mind to be able to step into my heart's desire. And so today's Dharma Contemplation is something like that. You know, there's a way that the Dharma has come to us. There's a way that it has been nurtured and passed on as how we talk to Dharma. But if you read the discourses of the Buddha, I don't really think that they were talks. I think he was preaching, and that's just my, you don't have to pick up on that at all. But, there was something fervent, effectual, infectious, right in the moment that he spoke. There was a generation of a certain kind of energy that produced a transmission and a lifting of one's mind and one's heart and one's level of engagement and one's commitment. And so I think that maybe somehow and perhaps in some ways we've missed that, trying to be what the sutras call cool. But cool doesn't mean like aloof in that kind of way. Cool means that the passions for the world have been consumed, that they have been shaved off. But it doesn't mean that there is no passion, because he said, why should I be afraid of this pleasure that's not born of this world? And he talked about how that pleasure was so great that it trumped any pleasure that we could have in this world. And he began to talk about this other kind of worldly experience. And of course, if one hasn't had it, then they only know what's available through the sense gates that show up in what we call our world, But he was encouraging that there is something else. And if one will lean into it, if one can have just a nano bit of faith, that they can imagine there could be something that we have not yet encountered in our state of ignorance. And if we could hold back our judgment long enough to lean forward and fall into it, we might discover something. Something would be worth one giving their whole life as they know it to encounter, to have just a taste of it even. And so this is how I have come to know the Dharma. It is that way. It is that way for me. Now I looked. Were you all able to get the one that has all of the algebraic formulas? That's a question.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Were you all? Oh, maybe I didn't send it because on my screen it's saying Q. There's 2. Okay.
You're not getting into the Abhidhamma, are you?
No, I'm actually gonna have what do you call an opposing view is what I'm gonna have. I may not be able. Don't worry about that. I can talk it out just as well as I can show you on the screen. So on Tuesday, we had a reference in the last class. By the way, Tuesdays is now posted, so you can review Tuesdays. We're kind of dovetailing the Tuesdays and the Thursdays together, and maybe in a little looser way, the Sundays, so that one has a full rounded, like a tag off reference, so that one can have a fuller, it's like connecting the dots. You understand what I mean? The Buddha, he didn't teach topically by subject. We have arranged these things by topic. If you read any one sutta, that could be any one of 50 different topics, just whichever thing jumps out at you, and so he was speaking to the minds that were present. Now we're going back and we're reviewing these, but we're not much different than, or any different than they were. So when we do something as a group, there's different things that jump out at different people, according to how their mind, is fashioned, what their experiences in life are, where they are in understanding the path, what they brought to the path from their previous experiences and spiritual studies or no spiritual study. So we all come together in this one point, but from a lot of different points. And the genius of his Dharma talks was to be able to leave each one full of something and able to take the next step on their individual personal journey. So it's sort of like starting a thread with a whisper and get around to the other end of the room, and 30 people heard it a little bit differently. And by the time it gets to the other room, nobody even heard what that person thought they heard. It just continues to unfold according to one's own perceptions and one's own views. And that's why the Buddha encourages us to, we have a view for sure. We have a perception, that's definite. But he just says, don't be so attached to it. If we can learn to be as equally available to other people's perceptions and views as we are to our own, we would probably hardly ever fight. The contention would drop down 90%. But because we cling so tenaciously to how we have understood it, how we have received it, how we have seen it, how we know it, that it leaves very little room for an opposing view. Combined with that, because we haven't mastered the skill of conversing in a non-self-preservation, sorry, could somebody cut this off for me? In a non-self-preservation way, we find ourselves, once we put something out there, that's not just my opinion, that's not just my voice, that represents me. And so we try very hard to hold that identity, hold your knowing me in that particular way, if that's the way I want to present today. Of course, we present in different ways, different times, and different ways the same time to different people. But that's all about that facade of a self, an individuated self. And when the Buddha talks about abandon, that it's like, how do I abandon me? What is he talking about? What is that all about? And so it's because we're holding so tightly to the words that we have crafted that mean things to us that we have difficulty. And so here we are, we find ourselves tied to words that express the meaning of actual experiences. And we take the words as the true meaning, and we get ourselves into a whole lot of trouble. And so he is also encouraging us to not cling so tightly to words that describe things. He said, better yet, have the direct experience, and then you know. And then you can point somebody to it. You can't take them to it because they have to have their own direct experience. But it will allow us then to come into the realm of experience. Otherwise, we just stay in the realm of blah, blah, talking about the Dharma. And so today, I'd like to go to that sutta. And before we actually get to the saying that I think is so yummy that I'm inviting us to together reflect on, and then I hope we can unmute everybody unless it's noisy in your place, and so that when we indicate what word stood out, what phrase stood out, that can just come forth spontaneously. And one day Zoom will catch up with the needs for all these things. But we'll see how it goes. Maybe it's good that it doesn't, because then we decide we don't ever need to gather together. We'll just Zoom forever. But I think there is something dynamic in people being able to come together, to be together. Even when only one speaks, there is a communication that takes place. There is an energy that's built in the space that also has a certain quality. Now, we found out that over this past year that we can connect on Zoom, and there's also provides a container, and something is built in the space, and we're far apart. We can understand that because we think about things all the time that are not here present with us not only are they far in physical distance, they are like far like in the past, or even further than that in the future, haven't even happened, but yet our mind conceives of it. So we know that the mind is spacious, and its capacity to reach to netherworlds is unlimited. And yet there's still, this how much more when we are compacted together in a particular space. That's why you can understand it can be so much more life-giving. And so I'm looking forward to us reopening. I think in perhaps by June. We just have to see what happens over the next couple of months of reopening with vaccines, and if our numbers continue to go down. If not as much as we'd like to, now's still not the time. We have been approved to increase our numbers some. So instead of 10 internal space, we can have 25. And so little by little, we're adding a couple here and a couple there who are wearing their masks, who are in agreement on still distancing, and as they get their vaccines. There are 6 of us. And what, did you go today, sister?
We're leaving.
We have to leave.
Okay, so, and 1 today, so that'll be 7 of us just this week alone, just in 2 days, who will be receiving the vaccine. Not many things I'm scared of, but big needles is one of them. And, I take insulin several times a day, and that needle is only like half an inch. It might be, I get the super micros, so it's like 1/4 of an inch, and that hurts. And so when I looked at those, I don't know, they look like they're 5 inches to me. Somebody said they're not that big. But, I mean, it looks like it could go through my whole arm and pierce the bone and everything. But for the sake of all, because I said, I just take my chances at this point. But for the sake of all, I'm going to, and this is like, I don't take vaccine, I don't take the flu vaccine and all that. But this, I'm committed for the safety and the sake of people. So sometimes we although it might be a good thing for ourselves that we don't do, we can make a sacrifice for the sake of others, And that is not the bodhisattva vow. That's living the life of a bodhisattva. Think this week. It's easy to do things that you want to do for people, but can you do that which is hard to do? Can you give that which is hard to give? Right there is where your practice is. Okay, so if we can put that the Udana Sutta on the screen. I thank those of you who found it for me. I tell you, so many things come to me in the course of the day, and actually the way suttas come to me to share with people is I'm not so much something comes to my mind to pick up a particular book. I'll pick up the book and I get directed to a sort of like a particular thing, and I read that and then I give it. As soon as I get it, I give it. And then I'm done with it, because that was for that moment. That was a quickening just for that time. And Prajna, in all of his wisdom, knew how to direct me to it. And so it's not like anything that I came up with or anything that I did. It's just being able to stay open to projects, to receive something to share. And in that way, we don't start harboring things and clutching and grasping. So even as you move forward in the Dharma and you love the Dharma, staying open to a prompting of pure prajna, that is unobstructed, that is not solid, that does not come from our sixth sense basis, but there is another base that touches another, the Buddha called Nirvana, an element that touches another element. And when these two come together, there is a knowing of something, there's a pointing, there's a directing, and one knows that they are not alone in the world. Even if there was nobody else but oneself, still one is not alone in the world. And this is called the First Discourse about Nirvana. And if you would like, just read it along with me here and there. Thus I heard. At one time, the Gracious One was dwelling near Savatthi in Jeddah's woods at Anathapindika's monastery. Then, at that time, the Gracious One was instructing, rousing, enthusing, and cheering the monks with a Dharma talk connected with emancipation. Those monks, after making it their goal, applying their minds, considering it with all their mind, were listening to the Dharma with an attentive ear. And so I want to start right there because there's some conditions being laid up here. You know, so we're not like lounging on the bed, chomping on cookies, you know, like while the Dharma talk is going on. He's saying that there is, you know, what you put into it actually is part of, or the main part of what you get out of it. So he sets up some conditions for how we should make ourselves ready to hear, to be impacted by the Dharma. And then there's a requirement also on the giver of the Dharma. Actually, he starts with that, and in another sutta, he chides the senior teachers, and it says monks because he was talking to monks. But you know, just wearing a robe or even taking some vows does not make one a monk. A monk is one inwardly. So how one lives their life really determines, you know, what their level of commitment and one who's truly qualified to be called a recluse, one who has, you know, abandoned the world, one who has renounced the world. And renunciation is like renouncing unwholesome, unbeneficial states of mind, whether you're in a robe or whether you're out of robe. You know, it's having the qualities of budding vigours, capacities to make the right choices, to make the right decisions, to do the thing that is gracious at the right time. Sometimes it can be an inappropriate thing in general, but there's a graciousness that's required that will have a future benefit that was greater than clarifying something that was a little bit out of order at this particular time. You see, all of this takes a certain kind of growth. Otherwise, we'll be looking for a certain kind of equality, everything being equal, when what's really needed is a certain kind of equity. So the one who needs much, you can give much. The one who needs a little, you can give a little. It's something like that. And so you look and he says that the Gracious One was instructing. So he was teaching, he was rousing, he was enthusing and cheering the monks with a Dharma talk, connected with liberation, connected with emancipation, connected with being free. So there's that element of freedom that was there, not just for informational purposes only, you know. So he's not just talking so we can know something, but talking so that we can actually have or set ourselves up to have the direct experience of something. We can know it in a true and living way, not just reading about it and saying, I see, I understand, I know, but actually directly experiencing. And it has its impact on these aggregates. You know, it first of all, it trumps them in a certain way that they bow to, they yield to it. So if you haven't had that kind of experience, then stay with the Dharma, because it is coming. Just push, sister. It is coming. And so there it was. It says he was instructing, he was rousing, he was enthusing, and he was cheering the monks with a Dharma talk connected with emancipation. So that's one side of it, the delivery. The second side was those monks, after making it their goal, applying their minds, considering it with all their mind, were listening to the Dharma with an attentive ear. So there you have listening. And so if you can be attentive, there has to be a kind of listening that's inattentive. It's like kind of going over there. And why does it go over there, like going above their heads? Because either we haven't made it our goal, or we've made it our goal, but at the minute we're not applying our minds, or maybe we are applying our minds, but we're not considering it with all of our minds. So he talks about you have to make it a goal, you have to apply the mind, and then you have to, sister, can we do that afterwards? Thank you. Make their goal, you have to make it your goal, you have to apply your mind, and then you have to consider it with all of your mind. Can't be doing two things at one time. The quality of the Dharma comes back to you according to the space and the respect that you give it at the moment. And so making it your goal, if it's just one more like self-help technique. You know, there was someone who came and they were talking about, they sort of stepped back a little bit from Christianity. They have no problems with Jesus and God. They just had a problem with the church and how they have encountered and come to know Jesus and God, and what that looks like for them was very different than how their church was walking it out. And so they kind of stepped back from church, but they had that relationship within their heart and within their mind. So now they're looking at the Dharma, but for them, it's like it doesn't carry the same stature as their Christian practice. And I'm like, well, then you're going to be wasting your time. You're not going to get that much out of it, because this is not a self-help thing, So it depends on the respect you give something as to what you will get from it. That's the only reason why the Buddha instructs on respect, and why he talks about these kinds of things, because he knows that we receive according to what we have given. That's why he talks about magnanimous giving, and giving with one's whole heart, with all your mind, with all your might, because in that same way we receive back. And the Bible says, cast your bread upon the waters and it will return in many days. Now we like to cast your bread upon the waters and it'll return. We're not so keen on that in many days. So we have to develop our patience to wait for the return of what we've offered. But if we've offered little, there will be little return. Offer much, much return. The thing is that in the beginning, you might do the offering for the hope of the return. But after a while, the offering becomes such a liberating action that you don't do it for the hope of a return. It is the glory of a return. And so in this way, he says, this is how, if you're too tired and you're trying to do a Dharma study, rest. And then do the study later, when you can give it your all. I tell you the truth, sometimes you can be a little tired, so don't be lazy. You can be a little tired, and once you start, it starts waking you up. It starts ringing your bell. It starts putting you in that place because you already have something inside, and you've been nurturing that, and you've been developing that. Now it's scratching the surface, it's popping up through the soil of your mind, and it's coming up, and it'll say, did you think about this? It'll say, look at that. Oh, well, we talk about crazy people hearing voices, but all of us hear voices. Aren't we all crazy? And so we have to know, like, being attentive to the planting of the Dharma, because then from the inside, the Dharma begins to rise up and sprout and bear fruit. It speaks to you, not with this mouth, and you hear it not with this hearing this through this ear, but throughout your whole body, the Dharma reverberates, it vibrates, and one little by little becomes less a human being, becomes more the living Dharma. So there is a change of lineage, but understand the full scope of the change of lineage. We're not applying something like these little peel and stick. We peel and stick a little Dharma here, peel and stick a little Dharma there, and whichever side has the best looking side, you show that side to everybody. It's not a peel and stick kind of thing, but actually we decrease and the Dharma in us increases. And sometimes when you're feeling low, the Dharma's there and it builds you up from the inside. Don't need somebody from the outside to pump you up. The Dharma builds you up from the inside. And sometimes we're a little too high, and the Dharma knows it knows how to bring you down. It knows how to chastise you. It knows how to bring you low. And in the beginning, we think that being brought low is embarrassing, or that being brought low is judgment. But in time, we come to really appreciate being brought low, because that's the uprooting of the ego, and the ego is all of our problem. And so that, in that one paragraph, in that short paragraph, he sets the stage for how we should approach the Dharma, or the giver of a Dharma. And you see, all in that, there is a certain kind of respect. There's a certain kind of appreciation. There's a certain kind of surrendering oneself, giving ear, to take hold of, to hear, and to consider something. So let us read it one more time so we catch the flavor of it, and then we go on. Thus I heard, at one time the Gracious One was dwelling near Savatthi in Jedda's wood at Anathapindika's monastery. Then at that time the Gracious One was instructing, rousing, enthusing, and cheering the monks with the Dharma talk connected with emancipation. Those monks, after making it their goal, applying their minds, considering it with all their mind, were listening to Dharma with an attentive ear. Then the Gracious One, having understood the significance of it on that occasion, uttered this exalted utterance. Now, let's look at that sentence. Then the Gracious One, having understood the significance of it on that occasion, uttered this exalted utterance. Understood the significance of what? What?
Of the monks being attentive.
Of the monks being attentive. So, it is not just about the giver of the Dharma. There is an equal, or I could even say a superior effort required on the listener. And I can tell you that the giver of the Dharma, those of us who are unenlightened, we're not only giving and we're listening. So it's it's doubly difficult for us. But look at the significance that he places on that. It's always us in our same ways of grasping, wanting to know something, wanting to get something, wanting the highest points. But you see where he places the responsibility right there. So one could say, well, it was the significance of what he was going to say, but what he's going to say is in his mind all the time. So it's not so much what he could say, but it's who is ready to hear. And then he goes into his Dharma talk. This is a great Dharma talk. It's so short. I need to learn that lesson because I can talk for a long time. But look at this. It's so succinct, and yet it is so powerful. He said, there is, and read with me, there is that sphere, monks, where there is no earth, no water, no fire, no air, no sphere of infinite space, no sphere of infinite consciousness, no sphere of nothingness, no sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, no this world, no world beyond, neither moon nor sun. There, monks, I say, there is surely no coming, no going, no persisting, no passing away, no rebirth. It is quite without support, unmoving, without an object. Just this is the end of suffering. Okay, so the first thing that he's been doing this teaching on annihilism, thinking like there's nothing, like we see something, it's gone, now there's nothing. And he says, nope, it's not that. So you don't have to be afraid. And most of us are afraid, even when we're sitting in meditation and we become concentrated. There is a space in that sitting when the hindrances start to fall away. And as we move beyond that, there's also a feeling that we are falling away. There's a feeling of a breaking apart. There's a feeling of the breath stopping. And when we reach that space, some of us get afraid, and especially if we've never reached it on our own in solitude, but we may be with a group of practitioners and their vibration is moving out, it's filling the room, and so it's an added benefit, and it's helping to establish a field where one can have good concentration. And so when they start to have these experiences, the mind doesn't know what it is, so it starts like, is it this, is it this? It starts making up things, so you're liable to see certain things and that are liable to get the feeling that you're jettisoning through space, but you know you're sitting in the chair or on the kitchen or on the cushion, or you may get a sense that there's stars and whirling by, or you get a sense of movement. You get a sense of you may be levitating. You may hear sounds, celestial sounds. It's not like the clock. It's not the phone ticking. It's not even the electricity in the walls. Because I know some of us, when we meditate, we get so still we can actually hear the frequency of things. And if not the electricity in the wall, certainly from our appliances that we have all over the room, but not that kind of sound. So there are different, we may see something, a ball of light, we may start to feel sensations. They describe it in the Visuddhimagga as like thin muslin moving over the skin of the face, and the body starts to react. You may get goosebumps. You may get them so strongly that you have ripples of pleasure. All of these things can take place because the internal bases are trying to figure out what's going on, so it's like going to its objects that it knows about, what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, or think. It's like, nope, it's not that. Nope, it's not that. No. And it's trying to figure out what it is. And so on one hand, we recognize that these things are happening, but on the other hand, we don't name them and claim them and make them anything, because we'd be doing that out of our ordinary mind. So we can have the experience, allow it to be there, but we don't make so much of it. Just see it sort of like a signpost that says, between here and there, you're right here. Between here and there, you're right here. So we can know where we are. So he gives some examples, but the danger in giving examples is we're so imaginative. Then we start imagining we're having those, So sometimes somebody will come to me and they're always telling me, like about they met Kuan Yin down at the pond or at the pool, and I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. And, and that's it. And they were like, wow, I'm just not so amazed. I'm not so sure if they did that. But if they thought they did and that helped them to be better at being, then that's fine for them, And so in this way, you just let people have whatever experiences they have. Just make sure you have some, and that it's real. It's not manufactured, because to make it up does absolutely nothing for you. But just being open and receptive to nothing. There may be the something that is beyond nothing. Now this is a deep teaching, and it's hard to get in and understand it, especially without having developed a certain basis for understanding it, unless the rebirth linking consciousness that's in that your physical body, that physical body, had some prior experience with that. And that's why sometimes we can catch something really quickly, because the ground, the soil is fertile. There has been a basis for being able to quickly understand it. You know, to actually have a reappearance in the dispensation of the Buddha in the physical body. I'm speaking of in the physical body of Sakyamuni. To have the Buddha in the physical body of Sakyamuni was wonderful, and it took a certain karma for that. For there to be, for those people to be born. Not everybody took advantage of it that he encountered. One guy, he encountered him when he was first enlightened, and he told him, he said, yeah, like basically like, so what? He went on, and he went back and said, maybe I'll go back to the guys who were struggling so hard. You know, they can kind of get where I'm coming from, and maybe I can help them a little bit. He went back to them. When they saw him coming, they turned their back on him. They said, oh, he started eating and drinking, and you know, he's no longer doing these ascetic practices. And he began to speak to them and said, when did you ever hear me speak this way? When did you ever hear me speak with this kind of power? You know, and then they said, it does sound a little different. And then turned around to hear what he had to say. And on that basis of lending an ear, yielding, giving themselves over, being attentive, and allowing him to exhort, to arouse them, they were able to receive. So you see, something was caught. Sometimes things are better caught than they are taught. And so staying open to catching the fire of the Dharma that can utterly and totally consume us. You know, having the faith for that. If you taste it a little bit to see that it is good, and it is good, that is the basis of your ever-increasing faith. It's not blind, but it's based on having had some experience, a little experience, and coming to find out that that was true when I opened up to it. It might go a little stretch to say if you believe it, you can see it, but it's along those lines. We have to really be open to something. They did this study of mice, and they were feeding them along a trajectory, and I think it was vertical, and they would run up and get their food, come down, run up and get their food, and come down. But then they changed it over to horizontal. You know, mice can smell food, right? They don't have to see it, they can smell it. But they have been so conditioned by the giving of this food, and they came up only with that added part of it, that vertical run for the food. And when the scientists changed it to horizontal, they starved to death. They had lost a certain capacity, an innate capacity, a natural capacity to find their food, because they were given this. So we have to be careful what we're given, and we have to be careful what we take. And when we take something, we should not take it as that's all there is to take. We need to leave some room for something outside of our tradition, outside of our particular way of knowing something, outside of the way we first heard it and, you know, and imbibed it and took it. It could be that, but it could be that and that's how we continue to grow, and how we continue to prosper in wisdom and in compassion, in gratitude, and in respect, and in generosity. Okay, can we go back to the And so he understood the significance of it, this gathering, these many people on one accord. It's so important to get on one accord. And if you're on 2 and somebody else is on 5, don't try to bring 5 down to 2. Try to get up to level 5, you know. and if one is in a bad space internally, like hold that in there. Don't open your mouth and ruin it for everybody. You know, we learn how to yield in these kinds of internal ways, but that is the bringing down. That's the bringing down of the ego, and then we won't have as much differentiation. You know, we talk about diversity, and you know, I understand the need for appreciating diversity. You know, but I'm just going to tell you, on the level between diversity and unity, the Buddha appeals to a sense of unity. And so that's why he teaches us to lift ourselves up if we need lifting, and to bring ourselves down if we need to come down to be able to reach those. We have to, you know, be able to run fast and to run slow. We have to be able to sit and stand, you know. And so, but we have to know the right times to do which thing that's going to bring about the greatest benefit and the greatest value to all. So that's how we have to think, especially after we start really growing in the Dharma, because it has its own strength. And if we're not careful with that strength in our captured or contained in our weakness, we will crush, we will defeat, we will hurt people, and sometimes we kill off the prospect for them gaining in the way leading upward for this entire life. So we should do things circumspectly, and we should be very, very careful. And so he goes on and he teaches, because they're like all sort of like on one accord. Or if they may not have been when he started, but he kept on doing what? He kept on instructing, rousing, enthusing, and cheering them until they got there. And when he saw it's there, the time is right, I could just give a little Dharma talk. You know, like shoot, right in there. And that's what he did. And so we can read together, there is that sphere, monks, where there's no earth, no water, no fire, no air, no sphere of infinite space, no sphere of infinite consciousness, no sphere of nothingness, no sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, no this world, no world beyond, neither moon, no sun. Let me stop right there. So now you see he's talking about this world that we know of, this phenomenal world, this world of conditioning, where there is earth and water and fire and air, you know. Then he talks about the fine material planes, when he speaks of the sphere of infinite space, infinite consciousness, sphere of nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. So now he's talking about jhanic attainment, so that when we are on this plane and we're understanding something good about the Dharma, and we're entering into that, that's good, but he's old, but there's more. And then when we go a little further in developing concentration that leads to samadhi, we start touching some of these other spaces, and that comes at the height of the 4 stages, or the 4 accomplishments, or the 4 attainments in concentration. That's why concentration is so important. You know, and we minimize it, like just do enough concentrating so that you're tranquil, so you can do insight. Little concentration, little insight. Big concentration, big insight. So he talks about it like imagining a light bulb. And you can have a 15 watt, and you can have a 40 watt, and you have 100 watt, you know. And so let your concentration shoot for that 100 watt, you know. And so don't be so quick to, when one gets a little insight, to think, I have the whole ball of wax, you know I'm enlightened, yeah. We have to like hold, he talks about the 10, you know, there's 10 dangers in insight. Nobody talks about those. They talk about the danger of the pleasure of John. But he himself said, why should I be afraid of the pleasure that's not born of this world? And he said, and then I wasn't afraid. And then as he yielded his ego to that, and what he knew about tamping down the pleasures of this world, he encountered less of this world and more of these other spheres of infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception. And when he got to the precipice of that, he said, you know, I think there's more than even this. His teacher said, nope, that's it. That's all there is. You know, they didn't say that's all I have to give you. He said, there is nothing else. And he said, I believe that there must be more, because if there is binding, there is unbinding. If there is the born, then there must be the unborn. And that was the distinction between his Dharma and all the others of his day and of his time. And so when we're talking here, the reason why I had asked about the other one that I didn't send you is I looked up Webster's definition of sphere. And it gave a very simple one. And we can think of a simple one. It said, like, imagine a ball. You know, it's rounded on all sides and every point is equal. That's a sphere. Okay, that's a great definition. I can remember that one. I don't even have to write that down. Then I looked at another Google definition of sphere, and it had like 4 pages of algebraic and geometric formulas, and they broke down sphere into like 99 different kinds of mathematical formulas. And I said, oh, that so reminds me of Abhidharma. The Buddha just gave it real simple, but by the time we like had to prove it to be so, we got so much of our intellect into it, and it made it all of this. So you can choose. You can go for all of that, or you can go for that. You can just choose. And some of us need all of this because the mind won't quiet down until we give it all of this. But some of us can like just accept that, and we can sit there waiting to see the manifestation of it. So a lot of times when people come into the Sangha here, they come with a lot of heady, high talk and all of that, and they get a little bit offended because they maybe think we don't have such a deep appreciation for that. We do have a deep appreciation for that, but I'm just like, let's keep it simple, I'm more interested in the direct proof than our explanations of why it is true or why it is so. I don't really need to know why it's true or so. I just need to know whether something is true and whether something is so. There's a monk, a friend of mine. I love him. I loved him. And he was very deep in it. And he was, kind of lifted up in his pride of knowing. And he and I would have talks, he and I would have arguments all the time, but we could have an argument around what we're arguing about, and we never lost our friendship. We were just both very passionate about our views, but in the end, we could yield enough to say, well, that's my view and that's your view, but yet still we're sister and brother. And so, but in the end, this young monk, I don't say he was that young, I think he was probably 60, but he ended up with all of that knowledge, because he thought he needed to really come to make sure we could get it, right? Because he needed to give us all of that, and he would have all the scientific data, and he'd have all, and I remember that when he would be teaching, he'd have everything on queued up on the screen, and he'd look at the screen and he'd just admire himself and how deep he was, and and it was but in the end, that monk committed suicide. Said that the demons got him, and all of that, he couldn't still his inner demons. And so I say to you, this is really not a head thing. And there's a place that our intellect and our reasoning is not going to be able to go to apprehend it. Yes, it is rational, it's pragmatic, but he said that this Dharma cannot be apprehended. Now, cannot be apprehended We could say that means cannot be understood, but I like it the way it says in that way because it speaks to me a little differently. Cannot be apprehended means you can approach it and grasp it. That's deep, that's clearer than cannot be understood. You cannot approach it and grasp it. Cannot be apprehended by mere reasoning alone. So yes, we start with reason, but we don't end there. So I don't care how many PhDs you got behind your name and all of that's good, that's good, that's good. We can use that in the world for the things that we need in the world. But what he's talking about is something different than that. And if one has had just the taste of freedom, just one taste is so powerful that it will provoke you. It will cause you. I'm sorry you have to leave, sister. I know you want to catch the end of that. You can listen to it on YouTube. It will provoke you, and it will encourage you. It will develop you. It will sustain you to be able to run on to see what the end's going to be. That was a song we used to sing in the church. Believe I'll run on, see what the end is going to be. Because he said this Dharma is good in the beginning, but it's good in the middle, and it's also good at the end. I see so many practitioners so excited in their first decade. By the time they hit that second decade, because they're so set in what they do, how they do it, what they know, and how they know it, and who gave them a certificate, that they can't go any further. And the fruit starts to rot on the vine. When you get to year number 20, they're starting to backstep. They're starting to look at something else. They start going back to their woo-woo things. And I'm not against woo-woo when it's real woo-woo. That's only when it's not real woo-woo, or you don't know it for yourself, but you just believe in it. He said there's nothing wrong with these kinds of things. He just said know it for yourself. One time he was talking with some monks, and they were telling him about Brahma and this and Brahma that. And he said, wait, let me just ask you a question. Do you know Brahma? Have you seen Brahma? They said no. They said, what about your teachers? Do they know Brahma? Have they seen Brahma? They said, no. He said, okay, well then let me just tell you one thing. I know Brahma, and I've seen Brahma. And that shut that whole conversation down. So he is speaking as one who knows and has seen. So I traverse the Brahma worlds. I know them, but you don't. You're just going by what somebody else said or reading what somebody else wrote. He said, but this is a way you have to walk the path yourself. He said, because when you do that, then you know the limitations. You know the advancements. It's like buying a map. Like I went to China, and, preparing to go, I got all these maps, right? And then we thought, like, we would, it's great to have a map, but it's better to have a guide, and it's great to have a guide, but it's better to have a good guide who's really familiar with the territory, who doesn't just speak the language, but familiar with the territory. And when I say territory, I don't mean the hills, the ups and downs, but I mean to understand how people think and the things you have to do to get where you're trying to get in China. And so the spiritual practice is like that. I remember we came up to a checkpoint, and then the soldiers came up, and he got on our bus, and there was another bus, and there was another bus. He made all those people get off the bus, and then they were like checking and rummaging all through the bus and checking all your papers and all. But our guide spoke the language, understood the people, understood the politics, and before we got on the bus, he took up a collection. He said, okay, so everybody be generous, because this is the only way we're going to get across through our tour today. He said, because we will be stopped, because we're mostly a bus full of Westerners. And we're just going to have to bribe them and keep going. And so when he got on the bus, our guide was white, but he spent, most of his life, he came from a wealthy family, so he spent most of his life with a private tutor, and he went all over Asia, studying and learning. So he didn't just like learn, he didn't take a Babel course and learn Chinese. I mean, he had it like Chinese have it, you know, and he knew all the, you know, the inferences, the way I was invited to teach in Germany, and I said, like, you know, I'm not sure this is going to work out. She said, oh, no, we'll have a translator. I said, yeah, but it's got to be somebody who can do more than translate words. They have to understand my colloquial speech. You know, and if they don't get it, they're not going to be able to connect these dots for people, and it's just going to completely fall flat. You got to be here and understand the colloquial speech to be able to, which is why my Dharma talks are not for everybody, no problem. You know, but for the ones who can get it, it's okay. And so, so he started speaking, but when he started speaking, his dialect was so perfect, you know, that their scowl turned to an appreciation for a Westerner who could converse with them, you know, in whatever kind of way he was conversing with them. Next thing you know, he was talking and laughing. He got off the bus, and our tour guide got off the bus, and the next thing you know, there was outer exchange, but we had it already in a bag, all neatly tied up. I guess he was one of those who could like shake the bag, you know, good, because and we were set through, and everybody else, the other buses were there, and they were wondering like, what just happened, you know? And so it's like that with the Dharma, you know. We need a guide. I believe all teachers need teachers, you know, and I have several. And so I'm never confused about things. I may not know something, or I may have to put something against something else. But there's a difference between that and confusion. Confusion is when we already got a handle on something, we know it in a certain way, and then when something else comes in, that completely throws us off, because how can it be A and B? But we can find in the real world, a lot of things are this and this. When he teaches, he talks about, you know, he very rarely talks about, he does sometimes talk about putting things into two spaces. It's either this or this. But then sometimes when a person can get this or this, first you got to get that, because mostly we think this. And then he says this or this, wholesome or unwholesome. You know, he divides your thoughts into two sections, wholesome, unwholesome, beneficial, unbeneficial, like that. You know. But then he gets to another place. You got to get that part right first. You know, but when we've got that, then he starts talking about this and this. And it takes a little while to get those opposing views together. And then when we think we've got it, because we got this side and we got this side, yeah, we got the whole thing now, he talks about it's neither this nor this. And there we go, you know, it's like a slinky, but it's not just going around in circles. Every round goes higher and higher. It's like that. And I tell you, I think I've talked enough and nothing. It just ended. So we should read the last sentence. Oh, we can go back. We got to close him out. We can't cut him off. He said, there, monks, I say, there is surely no coming, no going, no persisting, no passing away, no rebirth. It is quite without support, unmoving, without an object. Just this is the end of suffering. And so if you haven't gotten there, where there's no coming, no going, no persisting, no passing away, no rebirth, without support, unmoving, without an object, we know we still have a ways to go. And if we practice meditation in the way that he suggested, And it suggested a lot of ways. You know, find one that works a little bit for you and keep going with that one. Don't dig 20 holes. Just dig one hole really, really deep. You know, and don't tell everybody you got to dig your hole right here. So expand, if you're going to teach, expand your knowledge and your direct experience of more than one hole, because everybody is not going to be able to jump in your one hole. Don't do that at the beginning. Do that at the top end when you're sure where to find the water. And then you can like douse for another hole. And you can help more people who can't get it that way. Maybe they can get it this way. And don't cut out anything and call it superfluous that he leaves in and says it's really important. If you go through the Majjhima Nikaya, 9/10 of the suttas, 9 out of 10 I'm saying, speak of concentration. There's about 3 or 4 that speak of insight, because you got to have the right foundation for big insight. You know? So some of us have to start at the beginning of the book. Actually start with chapter 2, because in chapter 1, after he gave that talk, you could read it just to read it, but when he finished that talk, he said, and the disciples were not pleased with those words. They did not get it. Hence all the other teachings. I would like for this to go however it goes, that everybody gets it, you know, so that one can think about this Dharma talk. This is a whole talk in that one paragraph. But if one hangs on, inclines toward, leans into the words, what a great hope, but not a hope without foundation, a hope with foundation. And the next time you're sitting, you know, if you sat there and just contemplated that a few times a day, just for a minute or 2 minutes, after a while it would get in you, so I tell you, like leavening, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And when you sit down to meditate, just having that already in there, softening up the ground. So not right after we turned off our jingle jangle or, you know, or whatever, or our TV or whatever, but just having that in there throughout the day, every day. When you sit down, that would like start rising up. And one would begin to be instantly soothed. That's how one would set aside their craving for the world. That's how one would set aside their agitations, their griefs and sorrows, their covetousness for the world. Because there's the promise of that right there. And little by little, one could feel into those spaces. One would no longer be afraid when they start touching a level of stillness that they're not familiar with, that the mind can't tell them what this is. The thinking mind, the conceptualizing mind. Even the body has to learn what this new experience is. That's why you get goosebumps sometimes, or you just feel energy moving all up and down. And you haven't taken one of those monster drinks. And colors become exceedingly bright. And sounds start manifesting from you don't know where. Mind trying to figure out, what is this? And let that just be a sign to you that you're moving towards something beyond this world. Moving towards the sphere of infinite space and fine material planes. But finish the first jhanas. Don't drop off into woo-woo land if you haven't come to the fullness of all that you had to encounter. Applied and sustained thought. And I'm through now. Gotta go. Applied and sustained thought. Then the stilling of applied thought, because your thought is maintaining. You're holding your object. And then there is because of that, there's a sense of satisfaction. It's a sense of pleasure, but the pleasure is born of the satisfaction. Like, I know where I am on the map. I know what this zone is right here. And this zone has with it a kind of stillness, and then that joy that's born of the pleasure of knowing that you're kind of in that zone. And then you let that have its fullness. And after a while, it'll be like pleasure becomes too rough, and you let pleasure all go. You just release the pleasure. It's like something that makes you laugh, and you laugh, and you laugh, and you laugh, and after a while, like, you just can't laugh anymore. You all laughed out. So you just kind of, you kind of let that pleasure go, and there's like the afterglow, Whatever gives you an afterglow, if you can imagine that space, it's not jangly and so physically present. It's like it came after the pleasure. So there's that glow. It calls it a kind of bliss. And after a while, bliss gets too coarse. And as bliss gets to fade away, that's where equanimity comes. Equanimity is not like, I'm just not going to pay you any attention, or I'm not going to pay that thing any attention. It's way more than that. And along with this equanimity comes a kind of generosity. What you're offering, the great giver, it just moves out. And because it moves out so far, it's so expanded that you can be equanimous because you have given all. And these are states that are available to us so that we can walk our talk, so that we can live the life that we sing about in our songs. And so, and from there we move into these other spheres. And he says, even when you come to the end of that, there's more beyond even that. So don't reach for the end. Just figure out how to take the next step. And if you do, either in this life or another, he says that it's guaranteed results. Sister, we make sure that they get this, or however they get that, so that they can concentrate on and meditate on that passage. Isn't it a great sutta? It's a great sutta. It takes you from the beginning to the end. Thank you so much for joining us today. May you be well and happy and peaceful. May no harm come to you, no danger. May you always be able to meet inevitable difficulties of this life.